Hello everybody and welcome back to the Shell by Shell series. You already know the gist. I'm not going to waste your time with the intro. Get your VPNs up and running by running the sudo openvpn command and start your Archetype machine. This is the first machine on tier 2 of Hack the Box starting point, so make sure you're starting your machines and you're following along because this one is going to be a good one. So like I said, I already have my machine running and my VPN on, so I'll copy our IP, go over to desktop 1, open a new terminal, zoom in a little bit, cd into hack the box starting point tier 2, and I'm going to make a directory called Archetype. I'm going to cd into that directory and run our nmap scan. We've run this a couple times now, well, more than a couple. Essentially every video we've run this just because it is so reliable and it picks up everything we need to. Just as a refresher, we've got -T4, which is a speed thing, so it just gets the scan going a little quicker so we don't have to wait as long, and it's a little more aggressive in its scanning. If you're doing something like a stealth assessment, you probably, one, wouldn't want to run nmap like this. You'd want to use a T1 or a T2 flag, and then the -A is all scans, so we have service scan, a script scan, and also a operating system scan. And in a couple seconds, we get our output. So we've got 5 ports open. We have 135, which is default for most Windows boxes, which is RPC. Then we have SMB on 139 and 445. We learned about that a little bit ago I forgot what the box name is called, but there's a video in the tier 1 of Shell by Shell series where we go through SMB, what the protocol is, how to connect to it, and some common vulnerabilities. We have 1433, which is a new port. We haven't seen this one before, and it is Microsoft SQL Server, so MSSQL. And we have a version here. We see domain name is, excuse me. Domain name is Archetype, computer name is Archetype, and product version. And then finally we have WinRM, so Windows Remote Management. We saw this a couple of videos ago, but it's essentially just SSH for Windows. And then we have some OS information that doesn't really matter. Down here is our scripts. So we see we can actually authenticate to SMB with the guest user. So we see SMB security mode, and we can authenticate as a user as guest. So that is good knowledge to know. And that's probably going to be the first thing we tackle here. SMB signing enabled but not required. Again, that archetype computer name. And that is it. And if we ever need to reference it, well, I can output it into a nmap.txt format. So make sure you do this if you want to output it into a file that you can refer back to, just in case we need to see any open ports or anything like that. I'll open a new horizontal terminal. So I do this by pressing Control-Shift-D on my keyboard. It's just nice. I like keeping things organized, and while this is running, I can run other commands. But let's check out netexec, and let's check out that SMB file share. So we saw that we're able to authenticate as guests. Let's just do that. Let's authenticate and ensure that that actually is what we expect. So 10.12, let's see, what is our 129 is our IP. Oh, that's done. So let's go back here. Just keep it simple. Netexec, SMB 10 129 254 166-U guess. And as I've done this box before, it is auto-filling for me, which is a spoiler for you guys, but good practice regardless. So we'll hit enter on that command, and we see we are successfully authenticated as guest, as our nmap scan suggested. We have the admin share, which we have no permissions on, a backups, which we have read on, which isn't default, and then $$ and IPC $. So usually the ones with the $signs, the shares that have $signs are default. So the only non-default share here is the backups folder. So we can use smbclient to authenticate to that. And if you remember the smbclient syntax, you are using a bunch of backslashes. Or there's a different way to do it. I don't know if you need all the backslashes. Maybe you can do 2 and then backups and then -u guest. Let's see if this works. Yeah, so not enough backslashes in service. So we'll just have to double up here. just to escape the backslashes. And then user as guest. And then for password, I'm just going to press enter because there is no password. And we get logged in to the SMB share. If I do quick ls, we have prod.dtsconfig. Let's get that and download that to our local machine using the get command. We see it downloaded successfully, so we can probably exit out of here, do a quick ls, and we see we have prod.dtsconfig. I'll clear my screen with Control L and cat out that file, see what's in it. So it looks like an XML config. I think this is XML at least. And we have configured value data source. So we have a password here, megacorp123, and a user ID of SQL service. So here are some credentials, and I'm going to make creds.text. I'll press Control Shift R to make a vertical pane, and just so I can see these credentials while I'm making the file. So this is our user ID. I guess the domain doesn't matter. We can just do SQL service, and the password is megacorp123. Control S to save, Control X to exit, and we have our creds. Let's see if we can authenticate to SMB. So instead of guest, let's do SQL service -p our megacorp123. Press enter. And we can authenticate, but there's no new shares here. So, and obviously by the name SQL service, we get directed back to what we originally saw in our nmap scan of the MSSQL. So let's see if NetExec does support MSSQL authentication, but I can find it can be a little finicky at times. So take what you're about to see with a grain of salt if it doesn't do anything. But we see that it actually does authenticate us, and we get the pwned, the lovely orange pwned tag. So this means that we have shell access to MSSQL. And going back to our nmap scan, remember we saw that this was open. So we saw Microsoft SQL Server was open on 1433, and here are the creds we can use to authenticate to that server. Now, there's a lot of ways that we can authenticate to an MSSQL server, but the way that I prefer and the way that I'm pretty sure Hack the Box prefers is using Impacket MSSQL client. So if we press enter here, we see all the options, but it's pretty much like any other Impacket tool. So we're going to authenticate using this sort of syntax where we have the domain and then our username and our password at the IP address. And then there's a bunch of flags here that can help us further if we need. So let's do that. So Archetype, I'm going to type it manually even though it is auto-populating. We have our password from up here. And then actually I'll just put this in quotes to, because there's going to be some passwords where you're authenticating and it does not like the, what is happening here? At 10, 129, 254, 166. But there'll be sometimes where you're typing this stuff in and Impacket can parse it weird, especially if there's like any special characters. So if there's an exclamation mark here and we don't have the single quotes, it'll read the exclamation mark weird and it'll have trouble authenticating you. So best practice with using Impacket tools and any tools where you have to authenticate or you have a weird password, I suggest using single quotes. It'll just make your life a lot easier. I believe, so it says here that the defaults is 1433, so I don't really need to specify the port here. Let's press enter, and we see that nothing happens. Let's do debug. Let's check debug. Encryption required, switching to TLS. We see that login has failed. Let's check our flags one more time, making sure we have this right. Archetype, SQL service. That is the correct password. Let's double check. Yeah, that looks right. What other flags are here that we can use? We don't know any databases, so we can't do that. Windows auth, this might be what we're missing. So whether or not to use Windows authentication, and the default is on false. So let's turn that to true and see if that gives us any luck. And it does. All right, fantastic. So we're able to successfully authenticate to the MSSQL server using these credentials we found off the SMB share. So we're doing pretty well so far. Now, this is similar um, to just like a normal SQL prompt. So we did this a couple of videos ago, or maybe it was a while ago, back in the tier 1 boxes, but we can essentially just run queries to query the databases. But the nice thing about Impacket's tool here is there's a ton of built-in functionality that can make our lives a lot easier when querying the database. So I'm gonna press help here, and we see all these commands that can help us. So enumDB, this is enumerating the DB, and we see there's 4 here, but there's only one that's turned on, which is MSDB. We can enumerate the users on the database. So we have, let's see, where's the username? My terminal size here is a little wonky, but we should be here somewhere. I'm trying to find where we are, but there's signing cert, policy event cert, or login, SA, DB owner. So we can see that stuff. Enum logins. Let's see if anything is there. And this is kind of interesting. So we kind of see who's logged in. So if this is us, we see systems logged in, MSSQL, Windows Management, SQL Writer. So these are kind of nice to see. And we also see that we are a sysadmin. So I'm assuming 1 is equal to true, 0 is equal to false. So we are a system admin according to this enum users. Let's go back to the help desk, not the help desk, the help table here. And the one thing that MSSQL is kind of known for offensive security is this command right here, the XP command shell. And the description here, pretty self-explanatory. It executes commands using XP command shell. So we can execute any arbitrary command that we want, assuming that this is enabled. So let's try it. Let's say, who am I? And we see we are Archetype SQL service. So we see that XP command shell is enabled, and if it's not, we see these 2 functions up here. So let's disable it and run that same command, because you may run into this problem where it may not be enabled off rip. So let's run that same who am I command, so XP underscore command shell who am I. You have to prefix all of your commands with this XP command shell, and we see we have blocked access, essentially just access denied. And then we can enable it using the enable XP command shell. And again, this is why I love using Impacket's tool, because they just make it super easy, right? It's a copy paste of this command, and now we can run arbitrary code on this machine, which is fantastic. And the first thing I think of when we have arbitrary code execution, or RCE, I think of a reverse shell because it's kind of wonky and janky doing it this way. So having to prepend all of our commands with XP command shell, I just prefer getting a little more of a stable shell. So I'll open up Firefox here. I'll go to revshells.com right here. And I already have PowerShell in the search, but for your search PowerShell here, make sure you fill out your information. So 1010 1420 with your port. I like to do 4444, but it doesn't really matter as long as it's not used. And any of these work. I'm going to do the base 64 encoded one. I typically find that this is better for sort of more niche reverse shells, such as using XP command shell. So I'm going to do this PowerShell one. I'll just copy it straight up. I'll open a new vertical pane, Control-Shift-R once again, NC LVNP 4444. So we're listening, and then I'm just going to press Control-Shift-V to paste this entire thing in. I'll press Enter. And we see up here on our reverse shell that we are now connected. If I press enter a couple times, we see we are the same user, so Archetype SQL service, but we have a lot more stable of a shell, so we can run the same commands, right? and it just is a lot more, it gives us a lot more functionality. So let's go to our home directory. So that this little tilde is representative of a home directory. It's nice if you want to just see where your user's home directory is. Quick ls, let's go into desktop, and we have our user.txt flag. I don't think I have the user.txt flag inputted in my, oh, my monitor's just turned off. One moment, I will be back soon. Technical difficulties. All right, sorry about that. My monitors decided to turn off, but moving past that, I don't think that I have the user flag owned on this machine. So I'll scroll down and yeah, I don't. So I'll submit the user flag, and I guess I don't have the root flag either. So gives us a challenge. I'll be working through the box with you guys. But now that we have the user flag, what else can we do? Now our goal is to escalate privileges. So right now we are the SQL service user, but if we do an ls on C users, we see that we have one other user to get to, which is administrator. So we have to escalate our privileges from our low-level SQL service user to the administrator user or the root user. And we ran a tool called WinPEAS a couple of videos ago where we were on a Linux host and it was able to parse through everything in Linux and just try a bunch of different attacks and see if there's any local privilege escalation vectors. We can do the exact same thing. The same guy who makes WinPEAS makes another tool called WinPEAS, and it does the exact same thing just for Windows hosts. So what we can do is, let's see if I have, I think I have it in my P's folder. P's. I do. So I have WinPEAS any, and this should work on any archetype. Or not archetype, architecture. Archetype is the name of the box here. So I'm gonna cd into that directory and then stand up a Python server, just a basic Python web server, so we can host this file because I want to get it from my Kali machine onto the box. So I'm going to use a tool called certutil. There's a lot of different ways to transfer files from your local machine to the remote machine. I like to use certutil. It's pretty simple. So you just do certutil -url cache -f and then your path to the file. So think of this, and since I'm standing up a HTTP server, you can use HTTP whack whack 10 your IP or local IP. So in that case, for me, it's 10.10.14.20. Make sure you specify the port you're listening on, and then you have to specify the file name, which is winpeasne.exe for me. And I'll just put that out to winpeas.exe. Press enter. We see the GET request come through, and on the side we see command completed successfully. I'll make that a little bigger just in case you can't see. And then if we do a quick ls, we see we now have the user flag, but also winpeas.exe. I'm gonna make this side a little smaller because WinPEAS output is very large. I'm gonna do / to initiate a file. So we're gonna run this file and we're gonna run winpeas.exe. And you may not see output right away, which is okay, but if you give it some time, it will start spitting stuff out. I'll give it a few seconds here, but as I mentioned, this is essentially the exact same utility and the exact same purpose as Linux. So we're going to run this file and it's going to go through a bunch of different privilege escalation methods. It's going to look through logs, it's going to look through any password files, it's going to look at permissions, it's going to look at groups. It's like, what can our user do on the machine that has any possible vectors for privilege escalation. So after this runs, I'll cut with movie editor magic to when this is done running, and we'll go through the results. So I'll see you then. All right, after a little waiting, we see the awesome WinPEAS, I guess this is WinPEAS because it's got the little blue bandana logo here, and we can start scrolling through. So if this is your first time running this tool or seeing this tool, we have a little legend here that is nice to see. So it's color coded, so if we see anything that's red, that means it's probably a special privilege over an object or something in the system's misconfigured. If we see something green, it's a protection. Cyan is in any active users. The light or the dark blue is disabled users, and then anything light yellow is links. So this would be a link, for example. So let's start scrolling down and see if we can dissect and properly exfiltrate any data from this WinPEAS output. So we have some basic system information. It is 64 base, which is nice. Virtual machine. We know that this already is Archetype. We know our username already. Username is system for this certain process. Lapse isn't installed. LFA protection isn't installed. So maybe cats for LSA dumps down the line, but probably not. No AV. I don't think this is anything. This is always a good one. So PowerShell history file. So in Bash, you have like your Bash history. Same thing here, PowerShell history. So let's go to this file. Let's just type it out exactly from the command line. So type, I've pressed enter a lot of times. Wonder if I can clear the screen. No. So let's type, and we get net.exe use archetype backups, and we have a username of administrator and this password. So it looks like in the PowerShell history of the SQL Service account used the administrator credentials to perform some action using net.exe. So it looks like we have more creds here. Let's, let me nano creds.txt again. So let's say administrator and megacorp admin exclamation point, exclamation point. And now that we have those creds, let's move back over here. Let's see if we can authenticate with those, right? So let's use netexec again. I'll zoom in here. Netexec winrm, or we can just do SMB, I guess. 10, I don't even know the IP at this point. IP config, just copy paste it. Copy paste -u administrator -p. We'll copy paste this. And here's a good example of exclamation points. Now they can kind of mess up your input. So let's, what just happened? Megacorp admin -s shares. Let's see if it works. I think my copy paste is wrong. Let's close out this terminal. Zoom in here again. And then run that command back. Megacorp admin -. Whoa, what is happening? Yeah, it's telling me to use quotes. I think that's what it's saying. It says don't use don't unquote it. I think it's a sign. -- shares. Press enter. There we go. So using quotes, I'll be able to authenticate to the SMB share. I'll close out this now, since we know that these creds work. I'll run it again just for cleaner output. And we see that orange pwned, which is obviously a great sign. We have read write to the admin. And remember, we also did have WinRM on this box. So a while ago when we did our nmap scan, we saw 5985, which is WinRM, as we know, and that is essentially SSH for Windows. So with netexec, we can check WinRM privileges, take away the shares, and we can successfully authenticate. So all we need to do now is just authenticate with, I like to use evil-winrm, but you can kind of use, to be honest, I think evil-winrm is the only tool I currently know of that does this. I know there's probably other tools, but evil-winrm has just been my go-to, and that's what I see a lot. So let's authenticate with these same credentials. And by the way, the syntax for evil-winrm is -i for the IP, and that's pretty much all you need to provide most of the time. And we authenticate immediately. Who am I? We are the administrator. Let's cd out and cd into desktop, which is usually where the flag is. And we have root.text. And I will submit this and let's answer some questions. So submit the root flag. Fantastic. Whoa! I was not expecting that, but that was great. That was it's great noise. Hopefully you guys hear that as well if you've been following along. Let's full screen and let's answer some of these questions. All right. Which TCP port is hosting the database? That was 1433. So we saw that was MSSQL being hosted on 1433. What is the name of the non-administrative share available over SMB? So that was when we initially used netexec to authenticate and list out the shares with the guest account. And that was the backup share. Number 3, what is the password identified in the file on the SMB share? That was the megacorp123 password from that prod file, the XML file. At least I think is XML. I'll look silly if it's not, but it looked like XML to me. And then task 4, what script from in-packet collection can be used in order to establish an authenticated connection to a MSSQL server? And we talked about this briefly, but it's called MSSQL client. I used the in-packet dash version, but in-packet is weird where you can just download the individual Python scripts if you want. I like using just the built-in Kali in-packet dash tools, but it's really up to your preference and whatever works. What extended stored procedure of MSSQL server can be used in order to spawn a Windows command shell? And this was the xbcmd shell command, which is ever so powerful. And if you find that it's enabled on any of your tests or your CTFs, make sure you always use it because RCE is never good, especially in a MSSQL environment. Task 6, what script can we use in order to search possible pass and escalate privileges on Windows hosts? This is LinPEA's brother, WinPEAS, which is just a fantastic tool. Thank you, Carlos, for your amazing work. Task 7, what file contains the administrator's password? That's just the PowerShell history. So console host underscore history.txt was the exact file, but it was the path when we took to our PowerShell history. And there's default paths to check for this, so you should check for PowerShell history, recycling bin, all good things to check when enumerating for more information and escalating privileges. And then we had our 2 flags that we just submitted. And that is the box. I appreciate you guys for sticking around for this one. I know it was kind of a long episode, but hopefully you learned a lot and we dug a lot into all the different protocols of Windows and sort of just navigating this box slowly and surely. So I hope you guys enjoyed it and make sure you tune in next week when we take on Oopsie. Have a fantastic day and happy hacking.